This is going to be about the murdered astronauts on the Apollo training, Gus Grissom, White, and Chaffee, and they were killed on purpose. It was an Apollo. It was designated Apollo, but it was they didn't go into space. It was training on the launch pad, and they died in a capsule fire that the capsule had twice the atmospheric pressure of pure oxygen. The lock was changed from being inside to outside. Gus Grissom had been getting death threats, and he complained to the FBI, NASA, and everybody else, and he believed that those death threats were coming from inside NASA. So he was complaining all the time that the capsule couldn't possibly go to the moon. And he did kind of his own press release, and he hung a lemon on the capsule and released it to the press. I mean, this thing can possibly go to the moon. Here's that famous picture of him hanging a lemon on the capsule. And he told his son if anything happened to him what to look for. He asked the NASA control head to stay in the capsule with him while he did the training with the other two astronauts. Like I said, this was never a flight to the moon. They were just training. They were practicing takeoff procedures. Why they made it 2 times oxygen, pure oxygen and 2 atmospheric pressures. It was specifically to kill them. So those were the 3 astronauts that died, and the man that did the safety inspection for it was a man named Thomas Barron. Now he wrote a 500-page report, which disappeared, by the way, and he testified before Congress initially, and he said, there was just so many things wrong with this, I can't believe it was allowed to happen. Well, all of a sudden, he dies on railroad tracks with his wife and child. Now, how many safety engineers have been struck by a train on tracks with their wife and child in the car? I'm going to guess in the history of the world, this is the only time it's ever happened. Now, right after the tragedy on the pad happened, the FBI went to his home, seized all his paperwork, and they were never seen again. He told his son what to look for, that they were changing the lock from the inside to the outside, and his son confirmed it. It was kind of hushed. So let's go over why, he was killed. So I've got so much NASA paraphernalia, it's actually shocking. Here's one of the in-house newspapers that NASA has, and I did some work for NASA. I've actually done a little bit of work for NASA twice, and they give you these little goodie bags that have stuff like this and paperwork, and they gave me this. So this is these are rolls of supposed moon, satellite moon passings. We never actually went to the moon. If you watch the Apollo 11 debriefing to the press, just watch their body language. They look like people that are being put on trial for murder. They don't want to be there. And when one of the reporters asks, could you see the stars through your viewfinder, he starts giving an answer, and then all of a sudden Neil Armstrong kind of jabs him to get him back on the track. You can read the body, even if you're not a body language person, you can see that. So why the fakery? Well, we never went to the moon. Now remember, I've got a kind of important document here. This is the kind of get out of jail free card for Wernher von Braun from the Department of Justice, where it talks about he was a Nazi party member. Now remember, Wernher von Braun was in charge of the V2 and V1 rocket programs in Germany, and through Operation Paperclip, it was alternately called the Rat Line. He was brought to the U.S. and put in charge of basically the heavy lifting on NASA. Well, John Kennedy gave that great speech, we need to go to the moon before the decade is out. And Wernher von Braun was hoping to be able to do it maybe before the end of the 80s. It was decided during the Nixon administration that, while I'm talking, I'm going to show some paraphernalia I've got here. So it was decided, because of everything that was going on with Vietnam, and America was getting a black eye, and the Russians had already landed, had already put Yuri Gagarin in orbit. So here's the Russian paper talking about it. So they had already had Sputnik up there and Yuri Gagarin, and they claimed to have landed a mechanical rover on the moon. Anyway, this is a pretty neat thing. So this is the Russian paper talking about Yuri Gagarin. But so they knew they couldn't do it, so Nixon contacted Kissinger, and Kissinger got Donald Rumsfeld, and they went up to Stanley Kubrick, who had just shot the 2001: A Space Odyssey, so he already had the techniques of making something look like a lunar surface, and they did it. They faked it, and the best of my knowledge, Kubrick faked the first and the third one. He initially was just going to turn the soundstage over to him, but they did such a horrible job, he reshot it himself. That's why Stanley Kubrick had basically unlimited money to make, do whatever he wanted to do, because he did that thing for the government. Here's a document from Martin Marietta talking about the Apollo 13, and that was a big theatric thing. It was just to get people interested in, because after a few moon landings, even though they were all fake, people were like, oh, well, that's great, but we've already done it before. So they had to do some drama with Apollo 13. 13's the unlucky number, and we couldn't, we almost died. They almost died there, and that's the Tom Hanks stuff. So I have all kinds of stuff from NASA. These are blueprints for everything. Here's one of the press kits that I got from them from 1968 here, and it is pretty cool. But they give you little goodie bags because they have so much paperwork just laying around. Although they have the paperwork laying around, somehow they lost the original tapes to the Apollo 11 landing, and they basically claim, well, it was on VHS, and we had to we lost them. We probably taped over it, so we lost all the original photographs and the original video, really. And this is a copy of a Wernher von Braun memo to a major general. So all the moon landings happened during the Nixon administration. The only moon missions that went through the Van Allen radiation belt were the Apollo missions, not Apollo-Soyuz, but the ones to the moon. Now, they only happened during the Nixon administration, and we somehow can't go back to the moon now. Now, they claim they can do all this stuff, but and they always talk about going back to the moon. We're going to go back to the moon. Well, they never actually do. And if you look at go on YouTube and punch in Project Orion. The Discovery Channel was interviewing this NASA thing. So we're going to go to the moon. We're going to have to get this Orion capsule, and first we're going to send it up there by itself because we're going to have to get through the Van Allen radiation belt, and there's all kinds of radiation there. We just don't know how we're going to do it. And finally, the reporter, smart guy, kind of asked him, well, why don't you just go one of the old Apollo capsules? They went through the moon. They went through the Van Allen radiation belt back and forth, and nothing happened. And he kind of climbs up, and so all of a sudden that series of interviews, they stopped doing it. And so if you watched all the stuff they did, NASA wouldn't allow a direct news feed off of their feeds. There's a lady down in Australia the people in Australia got a different feed during the first moon landing. They saw a Coke bottle roll across. So Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing for the U.S. government, and he actually tells you if you read the book The Shining and watch the movie, it's totally different. And he's actually admitting that he did it in there. He bought the rights to it, and he changed a lot. So they murdered poor Gus Grissom. Chaffee and White were collateral damage. Pretty much everything NASA says is a lie. Please like, subscribe, and I've got more on timbosplace.com. Jay Weeder's also got great stuff on the fake moon landing, and I'm out.